So we've been doing a series called Experiencing God, and if you've lost track, let me just try to drag you up to speed a little bit. The first reality of Exodus was that God's always at work, even though we don't always see it, okay? Even though it doesn't feel that way, or it doesn't seem that way, it's still there. God's always at work. He desires a deeper relationship with you, not just giving you a job to do. You might like the calling, you might like the job he's got in mind, but he actually wants a relationship that's deeper than that actually sustains the calling. He invites you to join his work, not, dare I say it, invent your own in his name. Last week was the ways that God spoke to us, or speaks to us, the way that he directs his people. And when God directs his people or speaks to his people, it brings about today's question, which is a crisis of belief. One of my neighbours has given me permission to share this story. It was shared the other night in our study. So those of us who are coming to our joint for a Bible study will already have heard it. But my neighbour works on a farm, and most of you would know him. He was trying to encourage a couple of stubborn cows to move from one paddock that was a little bit sparse and a little bit dry, and there's not much there to eat, and he's trying to move them through a second paddock next door over into the cows' promised land. And the cows' promised land, long grass, it's all green. Just get in there and get after it. It looks awesome. And he said that despite his valiant efforts to move the cows with a motorbike and all that sort of stuff, that they were not keen. They just were not up to this idea that we're going to go with this, okay? No amount of encouragement would help them get to... They just wanted to stay put on the edge of the second paddock and just enjoy something that's a touch better than what they had. And my neighbour's thought, and maybe his comment to these cows, although who knows if they can hear him or not, is don't you understand what I'm trying to offer you? Don't you understand what I'm trying to give you? It's better than anything you've ever seen before. And the same invitation that is before Moses there is the same invitation that is before God's people all the time. His invitation to us is still the same. Don't you understand the beauty and the wonder of what I'm offering and where I want to take you? If you would let me trust you. If you would trust me. There are 5 occasions today in that reading where it says, but Moses protested. Now, a protest is not necessarily a bad thing. A protest is, I think, in the dictionary, it doesn't carry the sort of like the crisis or the big problem in mind. It is more, I want to suggest, a fork in the road where Moses has got to decide a couple of key issues about not only himself, but about the size of his God. And the question is, given I cannot humanly or any way, shape or form, can I do what you're calling me to do, can I trust that you will come through for me? That's Moses' question. Now, I suggest we can draw a lot of confidence from the answers that God gives Moses this morning. That's why I said you can write them down. So I don't mind if you get up and go get your notes. It's okay. Or you can use your phone or whatever. There's no shame, okay? Protest number 1. Who am I? Seems like a reasonable question, I think. Now, I reckon this is more than self-doubt. Because Moses has already tried to, didn't he, in previous times, in his own strength, to save some people, and it didn't work out so well. It just didn't work out at all, I don't think. And maybe it's his inability, maybe it's a growing sense of maturity that God's got him on, but it's a time that he actually recognises, I cannot save anybody from anything. I just can't do it. I am just not capable of saving anybody. And I reckon this is a very useful just reminder for us. We can run all the great programs and ideas and ministries and awesome things that the church does, but I cannot save anybody. Jesus saves people. It's his work. And we obviously have a significant part to play, which is why God's response is, I will go with you. Does those last 5 words give anybody some confidence? I will be with you. Because it's easy to read those and go, that's nice. God is with us. You know, it's awesome. My wall has a thing on there that Wesley wrote. Best of all, God is with us. It's the first thing you see when you walk in the door at our house. I didn't know what it meant. I found out later on that Wesley's parting words from this world were, best of all, God is with us. It doesn't matter what you're about to face. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter how insurmountable the mountain seems. It matters the size of the God who is with you. Okay? And we obviously have a part to play in that. We obviously have a part to play in prayer. We've got a part to play in a passion to reach people. We've got a part to play in proclaiming a message that's socially a little bit on the edge sometimes. We got to do it truthfully and encourage people to that place of repentance. But at the end of the day, saving people, it's his work. That's a great encouragement if you walk into work here every day, or if you come into church every day thinking, how am I possibly going to reach one more person for Jesus? We've got a part to play. But I don't have to carry the burden of success. I don't have to carry the burden of doing anything in a sense. I've got my part to play. But we're actually invited into this mystery, I think that Jesus gives us of we're all in this together. That's the same reminder that Moses is given there. Is the same one that Jesus gives us in the Great Commission. You'll never go anywhere. You'll never do one day without my empowering presence. Wow. If only the church, if only we as people could grasp the depth of that statement, it would transform your life. Protest number 2. Who are you? This is not Moses asking a dumb question. Like, I don't know who you are. I'm just talking to a tree sort of thing. He's not asking God for clarification about his identity or anything. I think this is Moses getting a little bit ahead of himself, and it's thinking along the lines: if I can't possibly do this, then everybody else ain't going to think I can do this either. I wonder if Moses is actually thinking about the next members' meeting on some way, shape, or form, and he's going, God, if we want to move the people from where they are to where you want them to be, I've got to give them something. I've got to give them come on, you got to give me something I can work with here. Whether that's true or not is another question. But God's response to him, I am a God of my covenant promises. I am a God you can count on. Verse 14 says, I am who I am. Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Now, that might seem good, but what he's saying there is that when you look to the next challenge in front of you, it might look insurmountable, but the same God who came through last time is going to come through again. Remember all those stories you heard growing up as a little kid about the way God moved people from a famine to a place of safety? Well, guess what? Hundreds of years later, he's still going to do the same thing again. He's still going to look after his people. He never left. I'm still here. I'm a God of my promises. Okay? Remember the last time that you had a significant need and it might not have come around in your timetable and it might have caused you a lot of sleep to get lost? But God came through. It's there to remind you again that God says, guess what? I am going to come through for you again. That is the significance of a God of his promises. And this is something I need to say to our church, and it should actually exist in our church. I don't know all the ins and outs of our history, but every church, irrespective of how big it is, how many people are in it, who's leading it, what its background has got, dare I say, should have, probably must have, a testimony to share of the times where God has invited them into something God-sized that they cannot possibly do, that a group of faithful Christians cannot do, that only could happen if he comes through. That is God's invitation for his people, to act in that sort of radical faith. And that is God's invitation for us in the years to come. To put ourselves in situations covered by prayer, yes, as God leads, yes, where we're finished unless he shows up. But we serve a God of his promises. We serve a God who promised his people we'd never go without. We serve a God who is more than capable of answering those promises. And what a reminder for Moses. I haven't seen God show up in my life, but I've heard all these stories about the fact that he will. And I'm being invited, in a sense, into this moment where he will. God is a God of his promises. And he not only continues to be with us, but he promises to come through again. Do we believe that he will keep showing up for us, is the question I have on the bottom of that point. Do we honestly believe that God will keep showing up for us? I hope the answer to that is yes. Okay. Protest number 3. What if? What if? Moses has asked a couple of easy questions, I think to sort of start with. And this is the one I think where the rubber hits the road. Because if Moses is anything like me, and I suspect he is, he is, I reckon, starting to see some of the bigger logistical problems on the horizon. Okay? Moses knows that there's at least 1 million people that God's trying to set free. Some commentators think it's up to 3.5. So the question is probably, we honestly don't really know the exact answer. But Moses would have his iPhone. He would know roughly from where they're starting and roughly where they're going. Okay? He's like, all right, so if you go that way, you can't go that way because you can't get over that mountain. You can't get 1 million people over that mountain, so that's not going to happen. You can't go that way because do you see what I mean? He's already getting ahead of himself. He's already getting ahead of himself at the biggest logistical nightmare you can possibly imagine. And I reckon he has something in his head like, if God can actually get them out of Egypt, like if that actually happens, they're going to end up at the Red Sea. They're going to end up at the Red Sea, and I wonder if we have to build a bridge to get over it. If so, how do we build a bridge? I wonder if God would stop the water for us one day. And if he stopped the water for us for one day, and there's between 2 and 3 million of us, we're going to need a space between 5 and 6 kilometres wide. It's not a little gap the size of the stage. If you're moving 1 million people in a night, you're going to need at least 6 kilometres of space for those people to get over in a night. This is not a simple exercise, okay? And assuming we somehow get over the river, assuming we actually get over there, we find ourselves in a desert. And how are we going to feed 1 million people or more in a desert? Many years ago, the Quartermaster General of the Army actually did a bit of an exercise with this in the US. They said, we're going to need enough food for 1.5 million people. We're going to assume that we need to cook the food, so we need firewood. That's some big firewood days, I'll tell you right. Okay, so we need enough food, we need enough firewood, and we need enough water to water all the animals, to keep everybody alive in the middle of a desert, and to wash up some dishes. Now the safe estimate would be, let's think about units, let's think about a train a mile long. Everybody okay? A mile is 1.6 kilometres. Think about a train 1.6 kilometres long. The safe estimate would be you would need at least 100 trains a day, 24/7, and you're going to have to be unloading them every 17 minutes. Every 16, 17 minutes. And that's assuming Moses can build a train. Okay? This is the moment, I reckon, if Moses is anything like me, which I suspect he is, where you become very, very paralysed. Because you realise that over where God is sort of tending to push us towards, my head's about to explode because I don't know how he's going to do that. It is very, very easy just to think it's too hard, isn't it? I'm really happy that these people are human, I've got to tell you. God's invitation to Moses is something I think that's quite stunning. It is. He doesn't even acknowledge the size of the challenge. God doesn't even acknowledge in any way, shape, or form the size of the logistical demand he's about to have. He just says, "Take what you've got in your hand and trust me." That's his invitation. To take what you've got in your hand and go. You got a big dream about how God's going to use something in the future, and you got no idea about how he's going to meet the need? One of the answers that he's got with the hand and the blood and all that sort of stuff is the staff. It doesn't look like much. It's a stick, okay? But the reality is it carries the supernatural power of God. It was a representation of God's people and to Pharaoh of God's power. That's all you can go on sometimes. It would be what would open the rock and water poured out. It would be what was raised high when the Red Sea was passed. We can easily get hung up on all the details, but we've got to remember that there are no limits to his capacity. Come on, church. There are no limits to his capacity. When he comes through, look out. Okay? And when he calls, he wants his church, and I think all of us, to look past the obstacles and to, on some way, shape or form, activate a level of faith that we don't know where it comes from, we just know he'll come through. Let me finish the last two very, very briefly. Protest number 4 is I can't. There's always something in the road in everyone's life. A lack of skill, I'm not trained, I can't talk, I'm not a public speaker, I haven't got leadership potential, it ain't a problem for God. He calls, he provides. That's the simple scenario. The reality, really, really simple answer from God is when I call you, you've got access to all my resources. That's all you need. Last one, I won't. Can I just suggest to you that's dangerous ground? That's dangerous ground if your last answer is I won't send somebody else. By this time, I reckon it's clear that God's a little bit angry because it says that. I reckon it's two things in particular. One is the fact that this mission's time sensitive. Like, it's time for God's people to leave. It's time for God's people to move. That's the end of the story. The second invitation, I think, is for Moses to actually join him, but it seems to be hitting a brick wall. And And that's where God's invitation is, get moving, but rely on my power. Rely on my power. You know, I will send you your brother. He can talk for you. I will send you this to happen. And as we get to read the whole story, right? We get to look at the whole thing and see how God came through. But can you imagine how isolated and how fearful and how empty Moses must feel? I'm just not capable of doing any of this stuff. That's where he wants his people. Let me just try to tie all this information up in two little points. A crisis of belief, faith, requires a continual demand for surrender. This whole story is essentially a fork in the road for Moses, where he's got to decide what his God is capable of, but he's also got to be willing to give away everything he's already made. This guy is a self-made man. He has made a family. He's made a career. He's up for a retirement. He's got his own little, comfortable home to get. He's got all the safety and predictability of his past. He's got this whole. Haven't I got a right to a nice, quiet life? Haven't I got a right to just some level of the good life? Now, I'm no snake handler, but I'm told that if you want to pick up a snake, you don't pick up its tail. All right, you pick up its tail. There's a good chance it comes around and tries to have a go at you. If you want to pick up a snake, apparently the way to go at it is behind the head, and that's if you don't shoot it first. But that's another story. Surrender and faith does require embracing the unknown and embracing a sense of I'm in danger's way here. I can't control the outcome. I can't control what might happen. I've just got to embrace the cost, and it's time to go. The second thing is it requires a step of faith into the unknown beyond your capacity. And can I just tell you, it's going to require repeated steps of that. Not one's not going to do it. Okay. In the first sermon I preached in this series, I said something that I stand by. And what I said was, God uses faithful people. Everyone okay with that? God uses faithful people. But I think it's also possible that you can wear faithful as a badge of honour. I can wear faithful as a level that I get to where I'm safe enough that it doesn't really cost me anything. I want to suggest that God is not happy with faithful people. What he's after is faith-filled people. He's after people who will not just have a level of faithfulness to him. He's after people who will get their feet wet when it comes time to cross that river. He's after people who will move past the badge of honour that I've got and take a step that is God-sized and where only he can come through. Taking a step is a practical move. Some faithful people can't take a step, is my point. There's a great story in Jewish rabbinic tradition. This is not part of the Bible. So everyone okay? It's not officially part of the Bible, but it is apparently one of the stories that's been written by rabbis about this moment, about what it means to take a faith-filled step. So in Exodus 14, I think it is, Moses leads the people of God out of Egypt. They go around in circles for a little bit. They sort of end up next to the Red Sea, and you've got. We all know the story. We all know how it ends, but you got to understand that they're surrounded. They're absolutely surrounded. There is no way out. So they're here. They've got water that way. They've got a mountain range that way, they've got an army that way, and they've got wilderness that way. There is nowhere for them to go. Talk about danger, right? All I can see, and this is just my reading of the story. It seems like God has them sit there for a day in the sun, watching that army come closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, and Moses says nothing. I've got to tell you, as a leader, that's terrifying. But there's a point there, and I reckon you can sense the fear growing. Like, can't you? Like, these guys are going to come and finish us, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's all over unless he comes through for us. And God finally says, well, come on, it's time to get going, you know. So Moses raises his staff, and the first one to hit the water, apparently, is a guy by the name of Nahshon. Now, Nahshon, we don't know a lot about Nahshon, but Nahshon is, by all accounts, that guy who's a little bit hyper out there. He's that spirit-filled wacky dude, right? He just gets out there and he's like, hey, God's spoken. It's time to go. It's time to get wet, right? So apparently, by all accounts, Nahshon is the guy who hits the water first, and he gets into his ankles, and then his knees, and then up to his waist, and then up to his chest, and then up to his shoulders, and then up to that right point right here where all I can do is breathe. Everyone okay? I'm just standing here and nothing's happening. It's not working. Like, come on, God, what are you doing? By all accounts, Nahshon is the guy who takes a deep breath and takes another step. And at that moment that he takes the other step and he hits the water and he's got no way forward, you know what happens. God comes through. I love that story because you can be faithful up to a point, is my point. But God will keep sending you over the course of your life into a crisis of belief where the only response is, I've got to take a step forward and trust that he will come through. Anyone think faith's easy? It ain't easy at all. By all accounts, Nahshon is the guy who takes a deep breath, takes a step, and the water disappears. Unbelievable. I don't know where you are today on this journey of faith. I don't know what it means for you to be faithful versus faith-filled and all of those things. But God is inviting, I think, all of us to take a step of faith in some way, shape, or form. Maybe your step is to surrender yourself and put your faith in Jesus. Maybe that's the step you've got to take today. Maybe the step you've got to take is publicly sharing your faith and getting wet, getting baptized. Maybe your step of faith is to step past going to church and find a way to be the church, serve in some capacity, get involved midweek, do something. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's between you and him. It might be a step to give something or to do something that is, quite frankly, outside my comfort zone, but God keeps bugging me about it, and I've just got to believe and honour him and know that he will provide for me if I do this. It might be a step for us as a church to take, and I reckon those steps for us are fast approaching. Don't worry about that. The point is, we've got to not be those cows who sit in the second paddock on the edge of the paddock who are slow to move. We've got to be the people who recognise the glory of what they're promised and step into being faith-filled, knowing that when he calls, he always comes through. Our God is not only worthy of our trust, He's not only worthy of our faith, but he offers his presence. He offers his promises. He invites us to trust him. And when we do, he activates resources and power for us to use if we would just start using it. That's where my notes finish. So let's pray, I guess. God, we just confess before you this morning that sometimes our faith level really takes a battering. Lord, it's easy just to be, in a sense, paralysed by what might happen, paralysed by what's next, paralysed by what's happened before, paralysed that, that God doesn't seem in a rush to show up, paralysed that we don't know the end of the story, and that's the hope for us as God's people. That's the hope for us as your church, that we do know how this story ends. God, I pray that you'd give us, that you would increase our faith. Would you increase our faith? God, if there are people in our church this morning who are going through that crisis of belief, God, I pray that they'd punch through that wall. Give us a boldness to live and courage to live with that sort of faith. God, let us, as your people, hear your calling. Let us, even in our old age and even when it's uncomfortable, step and take a step of faith and watch you come through. We thank you that is the God you are. We thank you that is the God you have promised to be. And we thank you in advance for those occasions where you in the future for our church have come through